A rocky relationship. The US Vice President meets Turkish leaders in Ankara for the first time since the July the 15th coup attempt. Also on today's program, targets of war as Doctors Without Borders pulls its staff out of Yemen. We look at why relief agencies are increasingly coming under fire. Hello and welcome to the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. It's a relationship that's become a lot more complicated lately. The US and Turkey bound by NATO and their shared security interests, but divided by so much more in recent months. The attempted coup in Turkey last month only intensified the criticism leveled by both sides, bringing long-standing tensions to the surface. On one hand, a shaken Ankara seeking unequivocal support for its democratic leadership. And on the other, Washington trying to balance its strategic need for Turkey with its criticism of its thousands of arrests linked to the failed coup. In any case, the US is now making a clear effort to reach out. Vice President Joe Biden is in Ankara meeting with President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and other top government officials. And there's a lot to talk about. Today's newsmaker is the Turkey-US relationship as we ask, what's the future of this influx relationship?
The ripple effect of the biggest threat to Turkey's democracy in decades is still being felt. A state of emergency is in effect following the country's attempted coup on July 15th. An investigation into those responsible has led to the arrests of thousands of people suspected of having ties to the Gulen organization. And Turkey has not got the response it had hoped for from some of its closest allies. The US and other Western countries were quick to criticize Ankara for the sprawling purge, its targets including members of the military, judges, and teachers.
In the aftermath of this, they need to remain true to the democratic ideals that they hold dear.
Ankara has expressed anger at a perceived lack of support from Washington, saying US criticism of the crackdown in Turkey has dwarfed its criticism of the attempted coup itself.
Bunda Amerika'nın birebir olduğunu biliyorum. Amerika'nın, İsrail'in ve
tüm dünyadaki olan oyunların ardında hepsi onlar var. Başarırlarsa sevinecekler, başaramazlarsa biz seçilmiş hükümetin yanındayız.
Yani niye vermiyorlar, niye himaye ediyorlar? Hani orada yaşaması bunun apaçık bir göstergesi değil mi sizce?
The diplomatic rift that has opened between the US and Turkey has centered around the extradition of Fethullah Gulen. The self-exiled Muslim cleric and businessman who lives in the US state of Pennsylvania is accused of being the head of a parallel state in Turkey, thought to have orchestrated the coup attempt.
Er veya geç, Amerika Birleşik Devletleri de bir tercih yapacaktır. Ya Türkiye, ya FETÖ.
The US has called on Turkey to provide evidence, something President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says Turkey has in abundance.
85 koli dosya gitti.
Beyond the US refusal to extradite Gulen are suspicions the CIA was behind the coup plot. Even for a top diplomat, it's a difficult task. US Vice President Joe Biden, the first high-ranking American official to visit Turkey since the coup attempt, is in Ankara to try and restore friendly relations.
I'm here today to express in no uncertain terms the continuing, unwavering support of the United States for Turkey in the wake of last month's attempted coup.
There's much at stake with the two NATO allies engaged in Syria's war. Turkey has now launched a ground offensive for the first time into northern Syria to retake the only Daesh-held city that lies on its border. And the US-led coalition is dependent on Turkey's Incirlik air base to launch its ongoing air offensive against Daesh. While the US supports YPG militants, which they see as the most effective force in Syria against Daesh, Ankara says the Kurdish group is the Syrian wing of the terror group, the PKK, responsible for a 30-year insurgency in Turkey, fighting for an independent Kurdish state. And there are questions in Turkey about what the US may be promising the militants in exchange for their efforts against Daesh. But beyond mutual goals and competing interests in Syria lies a more immediate issue: finding common ground on Turkey's public enemy number one. Randolph Nogel, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now from Brussels is Ian Lesser, Senior Director for Foreign Policy at the German Marshall Fund of the United States. And joining me in the studio is Ziya Altunyaldiz, a Member of Parliament from Turkey's AK Party. He's also the Deputy Chairperson for the Committee on Industry, Trade and Energy for the city of Konya. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Let me start with you, Ian Lesser. Is Joe Biden here for damage limitation?
Well, I think I wouldn't put it exactly that way, and I don't think he would either. I think he's here to deliver, he's there, I should say, since I'm in Brussels, to deliver a very strong symbolic message, and I think he did that very effectively. It is very meaningful to have an American vice president come to Turkey. He knows Turkey well. He is very good at this sort of thing for a reason. He's influential, and he carries important messages. So it's not a matter of damage limitation. This has always been a difficult relationship to manage. This is simply a very big new challenge, and I think both sides are making an effort to overcome it.
Ziya Altunyaldiz, do you believe that the United States messed up by not showing enough solidarity and sympathy towards Turkey in the aftermath, in the immediate aftermath of the coup attempt?
To be honest, the initial statement of the U.S. is not so much forthcoming just after coup attempt 15 July. That's why I think this visit is important. And I can say, especially for the region, stability is more than important. Especially, it has been long relations between Turkey and USA. Strategic and long-lasting relations between Turkey and USA. That's why I think this visit will deliver a strong messages for the region, stability, and for the fight against terrorism, and also, I think, the sentiment of Turkish people after July 15th coup attempt.
Yeah, interesting that you say, the sentiments of the Turkish people. Let's have a little listen into what U.S. Vice President Joe Biden had to say regarding that coup attempt.
The United States of America did not have any foreknowledge of what befell you on the 15th. The United States of America, the people of the United States of America, abhor what happened, and under no circumstances would support anything remotely approaching the cowardly act of the treasonous members of your military who engaged in this behavior.
So, Mr. Altunyaldiz, so you have that unequivocal statement there, and there's a spectrum here, right? I live here. On the one hand, you have people who say, well, the U.S. wasn't sympathetic enough, and then as you move closer towards the other spectrum, it goes to, well, maybe the U.S. knew, and then on the other end, there are people who say, the United States was behind it, it was the CIA, and so on and so forth, conspiracy theories. Is that going to placate those people in any way? The Turkish people who believe that the United States was being dishonest, are they going to be comforted or reassured by those words?
As I said before, I think this visit will play a vital role for the fight against terrorism and for the fight against Daesh, PYD, YPG, and PKK. That's why I think after July 15 coup attempt, it is important between, the collaboration and cooperation between Turkey and USA to settle and to establish a regional stability, and also to establish the integrity of Syrian territory, and also the national security of Turkey. I think that I can say, as Mr. Biden said in his statement, as I explained it before, those sentiments will either fade away or will remain. From now on, how USA will act on the extradition of Gulen.
So, if Gulen is extradited, those sentiments will go away?
I think it will help. It will help.
Right.
It will help. Or otherwise, you cannot make Turkish people believe in those statements. Let's say about it. I mean, think about it. The head of terrorist Fethullah Gülen terrorist organization lives in USA, and Turkey transmitted all the files.
Right.
And he wanted, I mean, Turkey wanted a provisional arrestment and also extraditing Gülen to Turkey. And it is important for USA to extradite Gülen as quickly as possible to get normalized the relations between Turkey and USA.
Okay. Ian Lesser, I want to talk about events across the border. Over the past 24 hours, a lot happening. As Mr. Altunyaldiz mentioned, Turkey crossed the border, Operation Euphrates Shield, targeting ISIS or Daesh. Now, that's the same enemy as the United States' enemy, so there's no problem there. The US is providing sort of air cover for Jarablus there. But then also the YPG. Now, that's the same YPG whose patches the US soldiers were seen wearing in recent months. Is this normal or is this a recipe for disaster, Mr. Lesser?
Well, the situation in Syria is extremely complicated with many groups operating. The United States has been willing to support the YPG in a way that Turkey has found unacceptable. We do agree, as you say, that the fight against ISIS, Daesh, is our #1 strategic priority in the region, but we're not necessarily always going to be on the same page about strategy. It's not necessarily clear to me that we always have to be on the same page. Just as long as we have approaches that somehow will work together. This is a very common problem in U.S.-Turkish relations.
Is it
where we both see the role of the other as strategic, but we very often are not exactly on the same page. I think this is not going to be finished anytime soon, in the sense that the chaos in Syria is not going to end anytime soon.
Okay, fine. Let's ask Ziya Altunyaldiz. Is this a very common scenario with U.S.-Turkey relations?
I think, as explained on the news, and Turkish armed forces crossroads to Syria to just eradicate Daesh and PYG and PYD and YPG. And I could say to US, you cannot collaborate to fight against Daesh with another terrorist groups and YPG and PYD. And for Turkey, PKK and YPG and PYD is the same, just name differences. And now the attack from Turkish forces is going on, the collaboration between USA and common forces for Syria. And I think it will help to reunite Syria, but I think as long as the Assad is remain in the power, it is not difficult. And it is not difficult. Let me just rephrase. It cannot be possible.
It cannot be possible as long as Assad is in power.
Yeah, it cannot be possible.
Because there is a perception from the outside that Turkey is now moving closer to Russia. Well, it is moving closer. Ties are normalized. But that means that calling for Assad to go is not so much of a priority anymore because Turkey is recalibrating. And that's why the United States is reaching out and they're saying, hey, we're your friend. Russia's not your friend. So here's an opportunity to make it clear. Does Turkey still want Bashar al-Assad to go?
Turkey is a big country in the region, and it has been playing a vital role for regional stability. And Turkey can speak about, can speak to Russia, Iran, USA for the regional stability. I think that sort of opinion is not acceptable for me. I mean, if you are in the region and you are affected mostly from the instability of the region, and you have a right to speak anyone who can help to stabilize the region, either Russia, Iran, or USA.
Right. Pragmatic politics.
Of course.
Ian Lesser, very finally, because we must wrap very soon, is that the reason the United States is reaching out, that they see Turkey pivoting towards Russia, looking elsewhere, and they're saying we don't want to be geopolitical losers here?
No, I wouldn't agree with that. I think the United States is doing this for reasons that have everything to do with the operations ongoing in Syria, across the border, all sorts of issues that were already on the agenda with Turkey. Actually, the United States also has an interest in stability between Russia and Turkey, which of course is a danger for NATO as well. So I think that reconciliation is certainly an American interest, and the United States would support it. I don't think that's what's driving this.
Okay, gentlemen.
We just want to see that strategic relationship stabilized.
Okay, point well put. Ian Lesser and Ziya Altunyaldiz. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Unfortunately, we are out of time.
I thank you.
War and tragedy are inextricably linked, but even the most brutal of conflicts are governed by international humanitarian law that prohibits warring sides from targeting civilians, schools, and hospitals, or used to anyway. Experts are now saying those red lines are being crossed in countries like Syria, Yemen, and Afghanistan, and that those responsible are acting with impunity. The Newsmakers' Sandra Gutman has this report on a worrying trend that's seen aid groups become the target.
Patients and doctors are legitimate targets. Women, children, the sick, the wounded, and their caregivers are condemned to death. Stop these attacks.
Some say there's been a paradigm shift in the armed conflicts of today. In places like Syria, Yemen, Afghanistan, and South Sudan, the old rules of warfare have been abandoned, and tactics are now more indiscriminate, with the most vulnerable being targeted, along with those caring for them. Since the Saudi-led coalition began bombing Houthi forces in Yemen last year, Doctors Without Borders, or MSF, has been treating the wounded on both sides of the war. On August 15th, 19 members of staff were killed in an aerial bombing. MSF has now decided it's become too dangerous to operate there and is pulling out its missions in the north. So is this only the beginning of rescue workers retreating from the front lines? A similar new normal has taken hold in Syria, where bombings by the regime against rebel forces have not only targeted hospitals, but the headquarters of rescue workers. For years, Syrian volunteers, known as the White Helmets, have been running towards the screams of civilians. Lately, they've been running for cover too.
We're experiencing a new style of attack, which we call a double attack. After an attack occurs, people gather, including rescuers, to try and help people. Then, after a few minutes, they strike again. Sometimes a place will come under siege, and hospitals and rescue teams will be specifically targeted, so that injured people are forced to use those chosen humanitarian corridors.
The evidence suggests a worrying trend. According to the International Committee of the Red Cross, there were more than 2,400 attacks on hospitals, patients, and health workers between 2012 and 2014, Last year, MSF recorded 94 attacks on hospitals in Syria alone. But here's what's worse. Those responsible for continuing to break international humanitarian law are getting away with it. The Syrian regime, for example, is defending its attack on the Al-Quds hospital last April because it was inside rebel territory and therefore counts as a target. The US, meanwhile, blames the attack on the MSF hospital in Kunduz on human error. A lack of accountability has horrified and frustrated aid workers. Last year, MSF publicly boycotted the World Humanitarian Summit, calling it a fig leaf of good intentions. The United Nations adopted a resolution last month demanding heightened protection for healthcare workers and facilities in conflict zones. But critics say there's no one to enforce the rules and see little hope of change without a greater political determination to end war altogether. Sandra Gatman, The Newsmakers.
Michael Neuman joins me now from Paris. He's the Director of Studies at MSF's Reflection Center. Thanks a lot for joining us, Michael. Let's talk Yemen first and then broaden it out. I mean, how bad must it have been? How bad must the situation be for aid agencies like MSF to have to pull out?
Well, and first, thank you for your invitation. I mean, humanitarians are right to worry. The situation is not good in Syria, not good in Yemen, where hospitals have been repeatedly attacked, as your story showed. In Yemen, the attack a couple of weeks ago, which cost the lives of 19 people, was not the first one. A number of hospitals have been devastated by bombings over the last few months. And despite guarantees that that wouldn't happen anymore, it did repeat itself again and again. And we've reached a point where we cannot trust the belligerents, and we cannot assume sending people in places where the chance and the probability of being bombed are so high. In that context, it will be quite actually difficult to return if there is no real change of attitude from the belligerents, and in particular from Saudi Arabia when it comes to bombing.
And yeah, and there are these massive challenges in places like Syria, hospitals being bombed, schools being bombed, convoys struggling to get aid to besieged areas. We look at a place like South Sudan as well. Aid workers were raped by soldiers not too long ago after they broke into their hotel rooms. Can we say that all of this is nowadays the new normal, whereas it used to be the exception? This is just something that we have to get used to, where people don't care, these nations don't care about the Geneva Conventions, these belligerents really don't care whatsoever, they'll do what they want to.
Well, I mean, I certainly do understand where you come from with that, and the dominant discourse has certainly been one where it's been said that humanitarians were more in danger now than ever before. That was the story we heard just a minute ago. And truly, the situations in Yemen and Syria, as the one in South Sudan, are not reassuring. However, I mean, the law of war, IHL, has always been violated since its very inception. We've seen hospitals bombed as early as the late 19th century, hospital bombed in the World War II, and MSF had hospitals being bombed in Afghanistan by the Soviet army in the very early 1980s. So we are used to work under fire. That's actually what we do. What has changed very much, rather than let's say the quality, the type of danger we're exposed to, is the exposure of humanitarians, because the industry has grown so much that you have like 500,000 people working in, let's say, that head business right now, working much closer to the front line as they used to in the 80s and early 90s. And mechanically, that increased the danger, the number of incidents. That's not reassuring, but what I mean is that it's not. I would take issue with describing the trend as a total collapse of legal norms and a total paradigm shift, as I heard in the story earlier. But again, I mean, there are reasons to worry. Kidnappings have been on the increase, certainly when it comes to Westerners, because of the rising price market for hostages, for instance. And again, there have been systematic attacks on doctors in Syria. That's not about MSF, that's about doctors being bombed, being jailed since the very beginning of the conflict in 2011. And the recent trend in Yemen is certainly not comforting.
Michael, thanks for contextualizing some of that for us. Michael Neuman joining us there from Paris. Thanks very much. Today's Newsmaker was the Turkey-US relationship as we asked, what's the future of this influx partnership? It's been a bumpy road for the two NATO member states, and a recent coup attempt in Turkey has only increased tensions. The US Vice President is in Ankara and categorically dismissed accusations that the US had any prior knowledge of the coup, following criticism of their perceived lukewarm response during the events of July the 15th. But with the war in Syria raging on and Turkey's pending extradition request for Fethullah Gulen, it's clear the two nations may still need each other, even if they don't want each other. You've been watching this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. As always, thanks for watching. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.